I wanted to start our conversation by asking the speakers to briefly share with us their first reaction after the election results and the news that there will be a change in leadership in the United States. So maybe we can start with Sudha, and then Rita can follow up. Sudha, so your brief reaction, your first reaction to the news that there was a change in leadership in the United States, Sudha.
Well, I guess, you know, sitting here in Berlin, Germany has been a country that has been sort of in the bullseye of the Trump administration. In fact, even before President Trump entered the White House, Angela Merkel had been a target of his criticism while he was on the campaign trail. So there has been a sigh of relief here in Berlin, and it has also made my job at the German Marshall Fund of the United States easier because, you know, our mandate is to strengthen transatlantic relations. We're an American organization based in Washington with 7 offices in Europe. And in Berlin, the Trump administration was seemingly, you know, an existential threat to what Germany stands for, because this is a country that depends on open markets for its economy. It is a country that also likes to use the principle of multilateralism that, you know, is different than the theory of Trump's belief in America first. And of course, this country also depends on America's security guarantee. And for the first time, we had a US president that was openly looking to pull the rug out of underneath NATO. So I guess it's a sigh of relief. I mean, we can get more into the discussion about, you know, Europe charting its own path versus sort of reinforcing the transatlantic relationship. That is a debate that's going on here in Germany, because it's also apparent to people, to policymakers, although Trump may be leaving the White House, Trumpism is still a phenomenon to stay in the US for quite some time.
Thank you so much, Sudha, for sharing with us your first reaction. Let's now move on to our second speaker, Rita. Could you briefly share with us your first reaction to the news that there will be a change of leadership in the United States?
Hi, hello everyone. I would say my first reaction was optimism, but a cautious optimism, I would say. The sense that it will be easier for Portugal, for Europe, and for the world to have a more multilateral approach and to work together. But in that sense, also the recognition that things have changed and things will not go back as they were before. I think there's this understanding in Europe. And as Sudha was saying, there's lots of discussion now in Europe about these things that we call strategic autonomy. What is that and how that can be achieved, and if we want to achieve that. But at the same time, I think a sense of reinforced belief in the power of multilateralism, of working together, of countries working together to solve world problems such as the pandemic, such as climate change, all those issues. I think there's a reason for optimism that we will be able to work together and to establish a new transatlantic agenda, a new agenda for Europe and for the United States. And in that sense, I would say, yes, cautious optimism would be my answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rita. Let me briefly check if the other 2 speakers have joined. I don't think so, so we're still waiting for Wolfgang and Jean-Claude. In that case, I suggest we move on with the second question. So let me go to my colleague Akasemi first. Akasemi, if you could follow up.
Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us for this event. And my question for both of you has to do with democratic legitimacy. As we know, both in the US and in Europe, we've seen the rise of far-right parties, populist parties that challenge the question of the democratic form of government. We saw in the US really repeated legal contestation of the Trump administration of the election results. In your view, what does the 2020 US election result mean for democratic legitimacy and the appeal of populism, right-wing populism in the US and Europe?
I see that we have Jean-Claude. Do you want us to answer or?
Wonderful. Jean-Claude, welcome to the program, Jean-Claude.
Sorry.
If you could unmute yourself, please, Jean-Claude. We can see you, but we can't hear you. If you could, yes, very good, Jean-Claude. No, now you're muted again. Could you please try again? Yes. If you could, we can hear you now, Jean-Claude.
Hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can hear you.
Sorry about
Wonderful.
that.
Welcome to the program. Sorry for the technical problems.
Okay.
Very good. Jean-Claude, we have a brief question for you, and that question was, we would love to hear your first reaction to the news that there was a change in leadership in the United States.
Oh, actually, well, I think, yes, of course, it's a change of leadership, because during this past 4 years, we have, I would say, in the US, even in Europe, the feelings that we had much more a president, a chairman of the Republican parties and a chairman than as a president of the United States. So in Europe, for example, we were hurt by the fact that the president at some occasions mentioned that we were enemies, and we were really, yes, hurt by these words. And so I think that about 8 out of 10 of the French people are really satisfied of Biden being elected as president. And we know that obviously we are not naive. We know that the president will act in the interest of the American population and the interest of the United States. However, we think that there will be a change in leadership in a worldwide position. We'll have much more discussion and act instead of acting and trying to discuss or to impose the US position. And I think it's important. And it's also important to have people in the new administration who are much more in favor of the multilateralism. They are much more Atlantist, and they are much more involved in diplomatic discussion. That doesn't mean that there are not problems, there are not things that we disagree on, but at least we will be in a way that we will discuss. We will not be enemies, and this is very important from the French side.
Wonderful, thank you, Jean-Claude, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's perhaps go back briefly to Akasemi. If you could briefly re-summarize your question, and then maybe I can ask Suda to be the first one to answer, and then Rita, and then Jean-Claude. Akasemi?
Absolutely. So my question was just, how do you see the 2020 US election result and its implications for democratic legitimacy and for the future of right-wing populism in the US and Europe?
Thanks, Akasemi, for that question. That's a big question. We could probably spend the whole hour discussing it, but yeah, I mean, there's always been a fascination here in Germany about American politics because of the history, right? I mean, there has been sort of a father-son or relationship, if you will, between Germany and the United States. Germany's been talking about having its sort of growing into a leader on its own within Europe, but the transatlantic relationship will always be a strong pillar of this country's foreign policy. And I think the reporting about, the fact that President Trump in 2016 lost the popular vote, but yet could win the election because of our electoral system, the Electoral College, has been something that Germans it's hard for them to wrap their heads around. And even this time, we could have had the same situation. But at the end of the day, there was also a lot of positive news in the sense that voter turnout was high on both sides of the aisle. There was no violence. There was a lot of prediction here in the German media about violence on the streets of the United States on election day or thereafter. So far, I think Germans see that the system is holding, that the checks and balances work, but that democracy has definitely taken a beating in the last couple of years. But they have this issue here in Europe as well. I mean, we just saw last week the news about the budget, the EU budget, and how the clause about the rule of law was problematic for certain EU member states, specifically Hungary and Poland. So I think Biden's idea next year about having a summit of democracies is a good way to reinvigorate the transatlantic relationship. Security and trade will always be hallmarks of this relationship, but we have new agenda items like climate change, but also I think to get things sort of recalibrated on both sides of the Atlantic, we have to look at our system of democracy and how to make it more resilient.
Yeah, thank you, Sudha. Maybe Rita, if you could also react to Akasemi's question, please.
Yes. I think we all sense that there's a rise of populism, not only in the United States, but also in most European countries. And so in that sense, that is normal. As for the rollout of the 2020 elections in the United States, some things were a bit puzzling, frankly, seen from the other side. The difficulty to vote, the difficulty to accept results, the time that all has taken, it's a bit concerned and it's a bit strange for us, I would say. But at the same time, what we saw was that the system worked. And that is the important thing. I mean, we all struggle. All democracies struggle sometimes. No democracy is perfect. But in the end, I think what is important is that the system proved that it was strong and resilient enough to be able to address those issues and the questions and the doubts that had arisen. And the checks and balances in the United States have worked, and that is important. As for the underlying sense of there's a rise in populism, it's true, but it's true in lots of countries in the world, and that is a common problem that we all have now. As Sudha is saying, I mean, the concept of a summit for democracies that President-elect Biden has proposed is an interesting concept, and is one of the areas where I think makes total sense for Europe and the United States to work together, because nevertheless, the challenges, we are proven democracies where we abide by the rule of law, and I think it's important that we work together to address those issues. But that's only one of the examples. When I was saying that the world has changed, yes, lots of things are more complicated now and are more and present challenges, and the rise of populism is one of them. We need to learn how to deal with it and how to respond. And that, I think, it's something that in lots of countries, we are still figuring it out, what is the best way to address it and how to deal with it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rita. Before I go to Jean-Claude, let me briefly remind the audience that we welcome questions from you. And so please use the chat function, write down your question, and in the second half of the event, we'll be happy to pass on a selection of your questions to our speakers. But let's turn now to Jean-Claude.
Okay, thank you. As Rita and Sudha mentioned, it's very from French people, it's very strange that one of the biggest democracies is unable to have an efficient electoral system. And we were really surprised. People are surprised that days after days, the US was unable to have its president being elected. And we had to explain how it works in the US. More than that, we realized that despite the fact that the current administration, President Trump, is still claiming that he didn't lose, but he was this election was stolen by the other party. We, however, we realized that the institution worked. The institutions worked. So this was the very good point. And we even mentioned yesterday in a meeting that the Supreme Court rejected a case from Texas. Cases have been brought to courts, and judges after judges, court after court, decided that there were no such massive, there was no such massive fraud. This is very important because it would be a really a catastrophic situation for the US to start with a new administration with the idea that the election was really stolen and there were massive frauds everywhere in the US. So this is a very good point that at the end of the day, and we frequently say that on radio, TV here, that saying that the president has the right to go to court, and it is for the courts in each state to decide whether or not there were cases of fraud. And I was very specific on that, saying that the president has a right, and you cannot deny him the right to go to court. What is really very sorry is that after this, all this litigation, and unfortunately he didn't succeed, he's still claiming that there was massive fraud, and this is not very good for the system itself. And no matter whether the president is from the Republican side or from the Democrat side, it's not a good thing for the system. And this can be, you know, it's not very good because all democracies are challenging today's by the population, and you can have a mistrust from the population in the system, and this is not very good actually, because I heard a lot of people saying, for example, in Philadelphia or in Texas, and there were massive frauds, and I could not vote so. And this is not very good for democracy, actually.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jean-Claude. Let's move on with the next question from my colleague Diolinda. Please go ahead, Diolinda.
Good morning, and thank you again for joining us in this event. So far it's been great already. So I kind of would like to bring it a little bit more to your own network of institutions that you work with here in the United States. First of all, if those relationships were affected during the past administration, and how do you see the new administration going forward? In what type of impact do you expect it to have on with your dealing with your partner institutions in the U.S.? And maybe we can just take the same order of the replies. Thank you.
Thanks, Diolinda. I mean, I think most of our peer institutions in Washington also found, this has been also an administration that shrugged off expertise. Usually in Washington, there is a close relationship between think tanks and the administration. Some people are derogatory and call it the blob, but others also talk about how, sometimes this revolving door between think tank and government is beneficial. And I think at the beginning of the Trump administration, that was the case. Someone like Fiona Hill from Brookings, many of my colleagues know her quite well. And, she went to the administration, but we all saw that there was a second phase with the Trump administration when the so-called adults left the room. And I mean, I guess what I could do to make it more interesting for all of you, even though I sit in Berlin, I work with Congress. That's my job at GMF. I run a program called the Congress Bundestag Forum and work with members of the Bundestag and members of Congress. And we found that it was hard when we did put together our seminars between members of Congress and members of the Bundestag, not the not the friction between Germans and Americans, but the frictions with the lawmakers on the American side. You know, we used to have the saying that foreign policy stops at the water's edge. But then when questions about Iran, for example, come up, you know, there's a whole different way that the Republicans look at multilateralism. And if you see polling, you can see that Democrats and Republicans, although the majority still think that the United States should be involved in European security, there is a lot of difference in on both sides of the aisle in terms of what foreign policy priorities are. For example, China is at the top of the list for Republicans, and for Democrats, it's up there, but not at the top, whereas climate change is a big priority. So you see these differences. And I think moving forward, it will be interesting to see how the Biden administration comes back to a traditionalist stance when it comes to the US's role in the world and having a rules-based international order. But I think we won't go back to a status quo ante, and the Biden administration or the members of that team and the national security team, they have the benefit of, you know, now having a second chance of making international agreements better, perhaps even with Republican support. So we don't have a situation in 2024, if a Republican wins, that things would, the agreements would disintegrate or go poof. And also, you know, so they have the second chance, they can learn from experience. But I think because of like what Akasemi said, it's very clear to them that there is still this backlash against elites in the United States. So moving forward, they're always going to keep sort of the lens of how does this affect the middle class in America? How does this affect Main Street when it comes to foreign policy?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sudha. And maybe Rita also, as a follow-up to Diolinda's question, also in connection to your own organization.
Okay. So I am the president of FLAD, which is a Luso-American Development Foundation. Basically, it's a Portuguese foundation, which was established in 1985 with the support of the American administration. And our mission is to promote the Portuguese development through bilateral cooperation with the United States. And we do that by several areas. And for instance, one of the areas where we work closely is in science and education. So we try to have programs with American universities and with students. And I would say in that area, we saw a bit of the struggle that for some universities there was, and also for the debate as a whole, a little bit in what Sudha was saying, the sense that there was a much bigger division within the American establishment in what regards foreign policy, and certain issues of foreign policy was much evident for us, and in some areas of work, it made work a little bit more complicated. Mm-hmm. Another area where we work is the Portuguese American, or the Americans of Portuguese heritage. And in there, I mean, things basically remain the same, because the cooperation and the work and the closeness that we have with them has not been changed. I would like to stress that the sense that of a certain, I mean, as lots of people are saying now, a sense of bigger polarization and in the United States, and that it is more difficult to reach a common understanding within the Congress about issues of foreign policy that used to be bipartisan and more easy to reach an agreement, such as NATO, for instance, such as the work to certain multilateral agencies, like the fight for climate change, the Paris Agreement, the World Health Organization. The sense that things can change, and they can change very quickly, and the sense that there's no guarantee that we will continue to work in the same way and we will continue to cooperate in the same way, I would say that has left us Europeans thinking hard about how we need to address this. And I think that is also a challenge for the Biden administration, for the future Biden administration, because I would say that worldwide there's a sense of doubt about the level of confidence that we can have in, and the trust that we can have in the United States. And that is something, I think the first step would be to rebuild the trust. And that is very important if we want to work together.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. Let's move on to Jean-Claude then. Jean-Claude, you're muted. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are two ways to take it. First of all, as Vice Chair of France America, we are a non-partisan organization, and we work basically on technical aspects, on the base of expertise, so that basically we did not have major change with other organizations, because most of the members of the other organization are fully aware about what we work on, the subject, so and so. And on the other side, we may have some differences. We did have some differences with people from the government, but it depends at which level. I think sometimes we face, when we were going through the US foreign policy, we really had the experience that we were in a kind of stop and go policy. We never, we had the feelings that it was not very really clear. So when we had to work on subject like the position of the US in Iran or in the Middle East, or even with Europe, not only Europe, but we never knew exactly what was the position of the US, the position of the president. Needless to mention that we knew that there was a difference between the Department of States and the president policy himself. There was kind of difference between them, and so we knew there was things going on, and disagreement between the president and his administration regarding the foreign policy. But basically, we tried to maintain a good level of trust in our counterparts in the US. And this is for the technical aspect. Talking about much larger for the entire population in France itself, as I mentioned, we are not naive, and we agreed on the fact that the president act in the US population interest, but we were really surprised that most of the time he treated, for example, directly has more link with a few countries in Europe, I would say, which was obviously kind of model for Donald Trump in Hungary, in Poland. And we had the feelings that there was a different treatment for some states in the EU, and that the president was not very focused by building a US-EU policy, and more specifically when French President Macron talked about the strategic project for Europe, we had the feelings that this was not well received by Donald Trump, by the president, and this is something very trouble for the French population. So we hope, our wish that on the climate change agreement, on the Iran agreement, and the Middle East. We hope that with the new administration, and I'm thinking about with Tony Blinken and John Kerry being in charge, we really hope that this will be a real change for the US-EU policy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jean-Claude. Let me now at this point turn to questions from the audience, and let me select one question which I find interesting because it asks for the European perspective here. And let me read the question to you, and then we could answer in the same order as we have been answering questions so far, with Sudha first. So the question is, it seems as if Europeans are relieved to have a return to normality, with multilateralism returning to the White House. However, with the challenges Europe faces from Russia, China, and even Turkey, how do you see the US-EU tackling these problems jointly? Do you think the EU will welcome a softer American approach, or rather the opposite, will want a harder combined approach to these threats to liberal democracy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As Rita also mentioned, there was a definite bounce in public opinion about the United States after the election was called for Joe Biden. I was actually surprised by that. I didn't know if we'd see a bounce like the Obama bounce in 2008 after the George Bush administration here in Germany, but we did see that. So I think most people are looking forward to working together on these challenges, but policymakers here in Berlin are certainly worried because there is divergence when it comes to how relations with China and Russia should move forward. I mean, Germans have always wanted to have sort of, good relations with Russia. And people here in Germany also look at both of these countries, these great powers, through an economic lens and not necessarily through a strategic lens. And for the Biden administration, I think Nord Stream 2, this pipeline project that Germany has going, is going to be a red line for the new U.S. administration, as for Republicans in Congress. And, Merkel has been pretty good about the sanctions regime against Russia, even though she's had some pressure from other countries, even within Europe. She's been towing the line, and I think she'll continue to do that. But she's been quite, she sees Nord Stream 2 in a different light. And also with China, I think the debate has also changed here. Germans are, after the pandemic, also news about, abuse of Uyghurs in China, and also people seeing what's going on between China and Australia at the moment, that could also happen to Europe, and that China can also split Europe. So China is actually really an opportunity to come together in the transatlantic relationship, or it could keep us apart if Europe and Germany look at China purely through an economic lens. So it won't be easy. These will be, issues that will have to be navigated. There will have to be trade-offs that will have to be made. But I think at the end of the day, Europe, because of this question that Akasemi asked about democracy, it's in its interest to work with the United States to be a bulwark against these revisionist forces in China, internally, but also externally, specifically China and Russia.
Thank you, Sudan. Let's go to Rita.
I agree with lots of things that Sudha has said. I think those are precisely some of the areas where it will be more difficult to find a convergence of opinions within the transatlantic allies, specifically Russia and China, for different reasons. Are areas where I think it will be more difficult to agree. Basically, because as we've seen in the case of with Russia and the Nord Stream, I think there is a dependence in large parts of Europe from the Russian gas, and also the sense that we want to engage with Russia from an economic point of view, because there are lots of links. And with China, there is also a tendency to look to China through the sense of big economic partner to lots of European countries. So it will be difficult I would say, to see it through purely geopolitical and geosecurity point of views. And I will stay there.
Excellent, no, Rita, very important. Let me also ask Jean-Claude.
Yeah, I would say that, let's say on the top, of course, we won't have in France a good relationship with the US because we share some values, and from an economic point of view, we have a good trade relation. So this is, we have 500,000 of people working for US companies here in France. We have almost the same number of people working for French companies in the United States. So from that point of view, I think we want to have a better relationship with the US. Although, despite the fact that there were a few words said by President Trump, we had a good relationship with the US during the past 4 years, to tell the truth. However, most of the experts here in international relations think that Europe must find a balance in our relationship with the US, because fact is, we are very close to Russia, for example, and this is a neighbor, and we need to take that in consideration. We have problems with Gulf countries. We are facing challenges here. So the idea for most of the experts and political leaders nowadays is that Europe should not be just a follower of the US policy, but a real partner. And this is the reason why the idea is how France, Italy, Germany is going to be good leaders by leading Europe to be a real geopolitical structure in order to be a balance between the US and China and Russia, obviously, and Africa. So this is what we call the idea of multilateral, not bipolarization, but multipolarization, to have multiple actors on the market. And I will end by saying on that question that still we are friends, but there are a few things for which we are waiting for the answer of the new administration, for example, which will be the US position about Turkey, which is a member of NATO, and we still have arguments with Turkey. This is one point. And also from the economic point of view, we are talking very loudly about GAFA, about extraterritoriality of US legislation, and these are questions will be on the table for discussion within the coming months.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jean-Claude.
Jerome, if I can add something to what I said about Russia. It's also important to consider that Russia is a neighbor, as Jean-Claude has said, to us. And in that sense, it's also a strategic partner to try to solve some of the issues, for instance, with Ukraine and in certain areas in our close neighborhood. We need to try to work with Russia and try to find a common, I wouldn't say an understanding, but a common position to act in certain areas. So it's not with Russia. I would say with China, the situation is more economic. With Russia, it's not only economic. It's also, it has to do with the bigger security and the bigger relationship in what we can do in what regards other countries of the region.
Exactly. As you say, Ukraine, Belarus, of course, Armenia.
Yes, I mean, we can't settle the situation in Ukraine or help bring democracy to Belarus without Russian involvement or without, I wouldn't say active support, but at least that they are not undermining the efforts. We need to recognize that that is the situation. And for those areas, it is important to work with Russia.
Yep, very good.
Of course, they are not our allies. I mean, for us, it's very clear, the position vis-a-vis Russia. They are not our allies. We don't share, I mean, the United States is our ally. We share with the United States a common vision of democracy, of freedom, human rights, rule of law. We don't share that with Russia or with China. So for us, the difference is very clear. What we are saying is that we think we need to engage with them and work with them.
Yeah, very good. And let me move on to Akasemi for the next question from the audience. Akasemi?
Absolutely. So as you all know, the pandemic has upended a great deal of life and business is not functioning as usual. Our audience is very interested in the future of transatlantic cooperation around issues related to the pandemic. What potential do you see for the new administration to work with Europe around issues of the pandemic? And a topic of special interest for our audience has to do with transatlantic educational exchange and the travel bans that prevented scholars and students in particular from moving between the US and the EU.
Should we start in the same order? So I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I think that the pandemic is going to be a reason for Joe Biden and Europe to work together. One of his main priorities is obviously to get the economy back on its feet. And he's going to need Europe to meet that challenge because, you know, the European economy and the American economy together make up nearly half of global GDP. So it's inevitable that Europe and the United States will have to work together to get the economy back on track. And in that light, I mean, borders will have to reopen at some point when it's safe to do so. And I'm thinking the low-hanging fruit in terms of the recent tariffs will also have to be perhaps erased. But I don't see a return to like a grand transatlantic trade and investment partnership, but somehow making sure that trade between the United States and Europe happens, and also R&D. I mean, you can take the blueprint of the vaccine. You know, this is a German company, BioNTech in Mainz, and Pfizer in the United States working together to produce this vaccine and distribute it. So there's definitely a need to get our researchers together on both sides of the Atlantic. I would hope that Joe Biden will make it easier for Europeans to study in the United States again. I don't know if Europeans will be willing to come so quickly, but I would hope so. And in terms of a transatlantic agenda, I find that the work that I've done over the past over the past decade, you know, we've always used this frame of post 1989, and in that sense, we sort of missed the issues of what people were thinking post 2008 when it came to automation, for example, and migration and globalization. And I think now, after the pandemic, we have the opportunity to put new topics on the transatlantic agenda. For example, the question of disinformation on the internet, that is playing a huge detrimental role right now and will unfortunately accompany us probably after this pandemic is behind us. And then the future of work, right? We've seen how all of us are working right now. This is something that could also be common ground for transatlantic cooperation. So I think there are plenty of things, and climate change, of course, as well. But yeah, this is an opportunity to redefine the transatlantic relationship.
Yes, Rita?
I agree with that. I mean, and I think the fight against the pandemic is clearly an area where it will be easier to agree and to find a common strategy. In the recent document, as we were saying, that there was a sense in Europe that this was the correct moment to try to renew the transatlantic alliance. And in that sense, the European Commission and the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs have presented. So for this time, Europe has decided to take the initiative. Mm-hmm. And in December, at the beginning of December, they have put forward a new EU-US agenda for global change. And in that agenda, one of the areas that is proposed to work together, so that agenda sets up a kind of program with several very concrete proposals in different areas of issues where teams where Europe and the United States can work together. And one of the areas precisely is the pandemic and the global effort for vaccines, for instance, because it doesn't, it's not enough if we get people vaccinated in the United States and in Europe, and then the rest of the world has difficulties in having access to vaccines, because this is a global pandemic and people travel and things change and things travel, and we will not get rid of the pandemic like that. So Europe has led a global effort to make sure with several other countries, but not United States, that has decided not to participate, to make sure that we were able to provide by the end of 2021 to all countries that need the access, free access to the vaccine. And one of the proposals that is made in this document precisely is to invite the United States to join Europe's global response and to join this initiative, which is called the COVAX facility. Of course, we are interested, I mean, in the capability and of action that United States have, and if we can join efforts in these areas and making sure that we have available vaccines for all the world, that will be a huge step and a concrete step that I think will be easier to agree on. Also, of course, from the other part, on the research area, I hope that it will be easier and there will not be so many restrictions to travel and to facilitate the joint investigation, because as Sudha was saying, in several of these vaccines, I mean, they are the result of joint collaboration between the United States and several European countries. So, I mean, it's true collaboration, it's true working together that things improve and that we are able to have better solutions.
Yeah. Thank you, Rita. Let's move on to Jean-Claude.
In addition to what have been said, I would just mention one thing. During the past few years, few months, most of the time when we had a problem, our leaders used to say, oh, just close the borders and we will be happy. With this pandemic, we were forced to close all our borders. And this is economically, socially, in terms of human beings, a catastrophe. We close the borders and it's just a mess. So within the past few years, we heard that globalization is awful. And I used to say, it's not globalization which is awful. It is the way we organize globalization. We will not go back to the good old days. Globalization is a fact. The world is global. And we can see that if you close the borders, if even a country closes his own borders, we are in trouble. So we cannot just behave like during the Middle Age. It's just impossible. What we need to do now is to think about the future and to see that if, for example, you don't have a developed country, wherever it is, and you don't have a good health system, you may have another virus which will spread over all over the world. And this is a worldwide lockdown. So we need to be careful about the others. So we heard during the past years, US first or Europe first or whatever first. Actually, it should be, how do you survive in this world, and how will we organize our different countries, different systems in a way that we will find a stable condition for all human beings. I'm not naive by saying that. I'm very practical, because you may have, we used to think about, oh, in Western countries, we are good, in good condition. No worry about what's going on in Africa. But if you let a virus to survive in Africa, you may have this virus in Europe, and you may have this virus all over the world.
Yeah,
so it's a danger. It's a danger for us. Climate change, it's a danger for all over the world. So for the entire planet, we need to handle these main points and to handle this main challenge. This is what for me, in addition of what has been said, this is exactly for me the way we should think about our future international politics, no matter it's transatlantic, with Asia, with Russia, with Africa, because we talked a lot about China, Russia, Europe, but we need to talk about Africa, because in Europe we have the African countries just has a border. So this is a concern for Europeans also. So we need to talk to talk about these challenges in order to organize a more safer planet.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. I see it's meanwhile 11 o'clock. We did start 5 minutes late, so maybe I suggest that with Deolinda, we have one last final question, and then to the speakers, I would like to ask just a brief comment on Deolinda's final question, Deolinda. You're on mute, Deolinda, you're on mute.
The question is also from the audience, and we've been speaking a lot about Russia and China and other countries within the European Union as well. And I would like to, the audience would like to find out, what are your expectations regarding the new administrations dealing with human rights violations?
Okay.
Well, I hope there will be a return to U.S. foreign policy that sees human rights as a value that is to be protected, right? I mean, and I think that that's a common value between Europe and the United States. And at the end of the day, that's what binds the transatlantic relationship, our common values regarding democracies, regarding respect for human rights, respect for the protection of minorities, the rule of law, freedom. These are the things that make Europe and the United States natural partners. So I hope that Joe Biden and his team, which I think, I think my opinion is that they will return to valuing human rights. Naturally, there's always some hypocrisy in foreign policy, but at the end of the day, I think they're going to try to return to making America a moral authority again in order to garner respect around the world, which has unfortunately dwindled in the past couple of years.
Rita?
Yes, I would have to say the expectation is to see human rights back in the agenda and a renewed interest in the cooperation within the United Nations and its agencies, but also a more active stance in what human rights are all over the world, a more interested and concerned approach, and the renewed interest in the human rights. And that's an area where there's where there is a common understanding. As Suda was saying, I mean, when we talk about common values between Europe and the United States, of course, the respect of human rights is one of the areas where we have a natural understanding. So that's our hope, I would say.
Thank you so much, Rita. And then to conclude, Jean-Claude?
Yeah, there are a few people around the president-elect very attached to human rights and rule of law and freedom. I think on that question, we need to work together, because most of the time we talk about human rights and the other parties, the other countries, they just take advantage of this kind of a situation and going after and having special relation or having personal interest. You have sometimes conflict of interest when you talk about human rights. So I think we can put human rights on the US agenda and at a certain level, even if we talk US-EU we work on a common policy on human rights and to act together. This is the basic, the starting point to fight or in order to impose rule of law in some part of the world.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. So I see it's meanwhile 11:04. We need to conclude the event. Let me thank my co-moderators, Akasemi and Deolinda, also my colleague Julia for moderating the event behind the scenes. Would also like to thank all of you for attending and posting your questions. And most importantly, of course, I want to thank our speakers, Jean-Claude Beaujour, Suda David Wilp, and Rita Faden. My colleagues and I hope to see all of you again at future events here at the Institute of European Studies. Thank you all for attending, and goodbye. Thank you.